1 minute ago, the UK Supreme Court just dropped a political bombshell that has thrown Britain into chaos. In a move that almost no one believed could happen, the court has ordered Prime Minister Keir Starmer to resign immediately over a scandal involving £124,000. This is not a rumour. This is not gossip. This is a direct order from the highest court in the land. Westminster is in shock, Number 10 is silent, and the country is already demanding answers. What happens next could change the course of British politics forever. The news hit like a thunderclap. Just moments ago, Chief Justice Dame Suka appeared before cameras in London and delivered a verdict so explosive that even seasoned political reporters were left stunned. In calm but deadly precise language, she announced that Keir Starmer had breached the ministerial code, concealed financial irregularities, and violated the principles of public trust. The sum at the centre of this scandal, £124,000, may seem small compared to the billions thrown around in politics, but it has become a symbol of something much bigger: dishonesty at the very top of government. Inside Westminster, panic spread instantly. MPs who just hours ago stood proudly behind their leader are now scrambling to distance themselves. Phones are buzzing, meetings are being cancelled, and party officials are quietly counting heads to see whether Starmer can survive even a single day. The mood is one of disbelief and fear. Britain has never seen its highest court intervene this aggressively against a sitting Prime Minister. Constitutional experts are already calling this the gravest legal showdown since the abdication crisis of the 1930s. The scandal itself has been building quietly for weeks. Auditors first flagged a discrepancy in the sale of a North London property linked to Starmer's family. At first, the issue looked like a minor clerical error, but as journalists dug deeper, they found evidence of deliberate undervaluation and failure to declare the resulting £124,000 gap. Then came whispers of undisclosed gifts, luxury perks, and offshore connections. Each new revelation chipped away at the carefully cultivated image of a Prime Minister who campaigned on honesty and integrity. What shocked the country today was not just the financial wrongdoing, but the sheer force of the court's language. The justices accused Starmer of systematic concealment and said he had eroded public trust at the highest level of government. These are not the polite warnings usually issued by judges. This was a public rebuke that left no room for spin. And then came the final blow. The court demanded Starmer's immediate resignation. Social media is already on fire. Hashtags like #StarmerMustResign and #Supreme Court Verdict are trending at record speed. Outside Parliament, protesters are gathering with banners calling for Starmer to step down before nightfall. The atmosphere is electric, charged with anger and anticipation. Some MPs have been spotted leaving Westminster early, avoiding reporters and refusing to comment. Others are openly calling for Starmer to respect the court's ruling and step aside. The silence from Number 10 is only making things worse. Hours have passed with no statement from the Prime Minister. According to insiders, frantic discussions are underway behind closed doors, with Starmer's team torn between fighting the ruling or preparing a resignation speech. Sources say Starmer himself is furious and believes the court has overstepped its authority. But legal scholars insist that the court's decision is final and binding. This is not just a political scandal anymore, this is a constitutional earthquake. Britain now faces a standoff between its judiciary and its executive branch, a confrontation that could drag the monarchy into the fight if Starmer refuses to go. Whispers of emergency powers and caretaker governments are already circulating through the corridors of power. One senior civil servant described the situation as paralysis at the heart of government. The coming hours will be critical. If Starmer refuses to resign, Parliament may move to force him out through a vote of no confidence, a humiliating scenario that could collapse his government entirely. And if that fails, pressure could mount on the King himself to step in, something not seriously considered in decades. Britain is entering uncharted territory, and every passing minute without a response from Starmer only deepens the crisis. The shockwaves from the Supreme Court's order are now ripping through every corner of the political system. Westminster has become a pressure cooker, with MPs huddled in private rooms, plotting their next moves. Leaked reports suggest that Labour backbenchers are already circulating letters of no confidence, with some saying that Starmer's position is untenable and that he could be forced out before the end of the week. The party that only months ago was celebrating its lead in the polls is now facing the greatest internal crisis in its modern history. Ministers are reportedly refusing media appearances, cabinet meetings are being delayed, and the normally controlled rhythms of government have collapsed into confusion. The media has descended on Downing Street like vultures circling a wounded animal. Cameras flash, reporters shout questions, and every vehicle leaving number 10 is chased for comment. The Prime Minister's aides are said to be working around the clock, drafting and redrafting statements that try to strike the impossible balance between defiance and accountability. One source described the mood inside as grim and desperate, with senior advisers quietly acknowledging that there may be no way to save Starmer's premiership. On the streets, the public anger is reaching boiling point. Protesters are no longer just gathering outside Parliament. They are marching through major cities across the UK. London, Manchester, Birmingham. Leeds all are seeing swelling crowds demanding the Prime Minister's resignation. Chants of "no one above the law" echo through Parliament Square as demonstrators wave placards with Starmer's name crossed out in red. Even outside the UK, the world is watching. International outlets are broadcasting the crisis live, framing it as a test of Britain's democratic integrity. Within Labour, the cracks are widening by the hour. Shadow ministers are reportedly holding secret meetings to discuss a post-Starmer leadership plan. Angela Rayner, Starmer's deputy, has remained notably silent, which political insiders say is deliberate. Rumours are circulating that she is quietly positioning herself to take control of the party if Starmer refuses to step down. Ambitious figures like Wes Streeting and Yvette Cooper are also being mentioned as potential contenders, each testing their support among MPs as the leadership question grows more urgent. Meanwhile, the opposition parties are wasting no time sharpening their attacks. Rishi Sunak stood in the Commons earlier today and declared that the rule of law is not optional, and that a Prime Minister who defies the Supreme Court cannot claim the trust of this House. His words were met with thunderous approval from the Conservative benches. Nigel Farage, never one to miss a political opportunity, addressed a crowd of protesters outside Parliament, warning that if Starmer does not resign, the people themselves will remove him. Reform UK is already reporting a surge in membership numbers and donations, suggesting that public anger is translating into real political momentum for Starmer's rivals. The stakes could not be higher. Legal scholars are warning that if Starmer continues to resist the court's order, Britain could face a full-blown constitutional showdown. For centuries, the supremacy of the judiciary has been one of the bedrocks of British democracy. To defy the ruling would be to undermine the very system Starmer claims to defend. Experts say that such a move could force Parliament to strip him of power or even trigger intervention from the monarchy. That possibility, the king stepping into a political dispute, would be unprecedented in the modern era, but it is no longer unthinkable. Financial markets are already reacting to the uncertainty. The pound has begun to slide, and investors are jittery about the potential for prolonged instability. Analysts warn that if the crisis is not resolved quickly, Britain's economic outlook could take a serious hit, with foreign investors questioning the country's ability to govern itself. For a Prime Minister who once campaigned as a steady hand after years of Brexit chaos, the irony is brutal. Starmer is now seen as the very source of volatility. Perhaps most striking is the speed at which public opinion is hardening. Overnight polls show Labour's support collapsing, with Reform UK and the Conservatives closing in rapidly. Nearly two-thirds of voters now believe that Starmer must resign immediately. Commentators are calling this a complete collapse of trust, a political free-fall from which recovery may be impossible. For the first time in his career, Starmer is facing not just political opposition, but open revolt from within his own party, from the press, and from the people he governs. And yet, despite all of this, Starmer has remained silent. No press conference, no statement, no acknowledgement of the court's ruling. His refusal to address the nation is being interpreted as arrogance by some, desperation by others, and paralysis by nearly everyone. Every hour that passes without a response deepens the crisis and fuels speculation that Starmer may try to cling to power, even if it risks tearing Britain apart. Britain is now standing on the edge of a political cliff, and the sense of looming confrontation is impossible to ignore. Westminster feels less like a parliament and more like the command centre of a country preparing for battle. Behind closed doors, Labour whips are counting heads and the numbers are bleak. According to insiders, if a motion of no confidence is brought to the floor, Starmer may not have the votes to survive. Some MPs who have been loyal to him for years are quietly admitting they can no longer defend him on the doorstep of their constituencies. The fear of electoral wipeout is overtaking loyalty, and every hour brings new defections from his camp. The pressure inside number 10 has reached fever pitch. Senior cabinet ministers are said to be openly challenging Starmer in private, urging him to resign for the sake of the party and the country. Some have reportedly drafted resignation letters, ready to go public if Starmer refuses to budge. The mood has turned from anxious to mutinous. He's isolating himself, one Labour insider whispered to journalists, and if he keeps going down this path, he will drag us all down with him. This is no longer just a question of one man's career, it is about the survival of an entire government. Meanwhile, the opposition is turning up the heat. The Conservatives have called for an emergency session of Parliament to debate the Prime Minister's legitimacy. Rishi Sunak has made it clear that his party will force a no-confidence vote if Starmer does not resign voluntarily. Reform UK's Nigel Farage has escalated his rhetoric even further, warning that Britain is on the brink of a democratic uprising if the court's ruling is ignored. His words are being echoed on the streets, where the protests have grown larger, louder, and more determined. Parliament Square is now a sea of placards and chants, with some demonstrators vowing to camp there until Starmer steps down. The constitutional stakes are rising too. Legal experts are issuing urgent warnings that Britain is entering uncharted territory. For centuries, the principle that no one is above the law has been the cornerstone of British democracy. If the sitting Prime Minister defies the Supreme Court, it could trigger a crisis not seen in generations. Some scholars are now openly discussing the possibility that the King could be forced to intervene, using reserve powers to dismiss the government and appoint a caretaker administration. The mere mention of royal involvement has sent shockwaves through the political class. But as one constitutional expert said bluntly, if the Prime Minister refuses to go, the Crown may have no choice. The monarchy's position is now being watched closely. Sources inside Buckingham Palace suggest that the King has been briefed on the situation and is deeply concerned about the potential for a constitutional standoff. While the monarch traditionally avoids politics, the palace is said to be preparing contingency plans in case Starmer continues to resist. Royal watchers say that if the crisis worsens, a quiet but decisive intervention could take place behind the scenes to preserve the stability of the state. Such a move would be unprecedented in modern Britain, but these are unprecedented times. The media has gone into overdrive, treating the crisis like a national emergency. Front pages are dominated by headlines demanding accountability. Editorial boards that once supported Starmer are now calling for him to respect the court and step aside. Even the BBC, usually cautious in its coverage, ran a bold headline reading, "Supreme Court orders PM to resign." Nation awaits response. Internationally, the story is being reported as a test of Britain's democratic resilience. The New York Times has described it as a constitutional earthquake, while European leaders are privately urging a swift resolution to avoid further destabilising the continent. Financial markets are trembling under the uncertainty. The pound is volatile, gilt yields are climbing, and business leaders are warning of an investment freeze if the government remains in limbo. Britain's image as a stable, predictable democracy is being called into question. For a Prime Minister who once promised to restore competence after years of turmoil, the irony could not be more cruel. Starmer is now the face of instability, and every minute of silence from Number 10 reinforces that perception. But the most dangerous development may be the collapse of discipline within Labour itself. WhatsApp leaks from party officials reveal panic, despair, and a sense that the leader has lost the country. Several shadow ministers are reportedly preparing coordinated resignations if Starmer refuses to announce his departure by the end of the day. Such a mass walkout could collapse the entire front bench and leave Starmer isolated, forcing him to choose between resignation or complete governmental paralysis. The final act of this crisis is now beginning to unfold, and it feels less like politics and more like history being written in real time. Westminster has erupted into open revolt. Overnight, at least a dozen shadow ministers have resigned from their posts, declaring publicly that they can no longer serve under a Prime Minister who refuses to obey the Supreme Court. Their resignation letters are being posted on social media one by one, each of them a political dagger aimed straight at Starmer's authority. By morning, the Labour frontbench looks gutted, with key portfolios left leaderless and the party's message descending into chaos. Parliament itself is preparing for what could be the most explosive session in decades. Multiple motions of no confidence have already been tabled, carrying the signatures of both opposition and disillusioned Labour MPs. The Speaker of the House is expected to allow debate within hours, and insiders say the arithmetic is already clear. Starmer does not have the numbers to survive. Some backbenchers have even gone further, suggesting that if he tries to cling to power, they will cross the floor and vote with the opposition to bring him down. The mood is one of grim determination. For many MPs, this is no longer about party loyalty, but about restoring faith in the democratic system before it collapses completely. Outside Westminster, the streets have turned into a pressure valve for the nation's fury. Protest numbers have swelled into the tens of thousands, with Parliament Square now resembling a permanent encampment. Students, trade unions, pensioners, and ordinary citizens have joined together in a rare moment of unity. Banners reading, "The court has spoken and no one above the law," wave in the autumn wind. Chants grow louder by the hour, and the sound of drums and megaphones now fills central London. Police presence has been stepped up amid fears that the protests could spill over into direct action if Starmer refuses to step aside. The international spotlight has never been brighter. Foreign governments are monitoring the crisis closely, and the pressure from allies is mounting. In Washington, officials have reportedly warned Britain that prolonged instability could undermine global security cooperation. European leaders are privately urging Labour officials to resolve the crisis quickly, fearing that a distracted UK could weaken NATO's united front at a critical time. The message is clear. The world expects Britain to show that the rule of law still matters. Inside Number 10, the atmosphere is described as suffocating. Staffers are reportedly working in near silence, afraid of leaks and wary of association with a government that looks increasingly doomed. Some advisors have already quietly left the building, unwilling to tie their reputations to what they see as a sinking ship. Starmer himself is said to be furious and combative, refusing to believe that the court has the power to end his premiership. "This is a coup by the judiciary," one insider quoted him as saying, but legal experts dismiss the claim as desperation. The monarchy is now firmly in the picture. Buckingham Palace has reportedly been in direct contact with senior government officials, and the king is being kept updated by the hour. Constitutional scholars believe that if Starmer continues to resist both the court and Parliament, the monarch could be forced to use reserve powers to appoint a caretaker prime minister. Such an event would be one of the most dramatic interventions in modern British history, a last resort measure to prevent total governmental collapse. The fact that this is even being discussed shows how serious the crisis has become. The media narrative has hardened completely against Starmer. Outlets that once defended him are now publishing blistering editorials demanding his immediate resignation. The Guardian, The Times, even traditionally sympathetic broadcasters have declared that his refusal to go is a danger to democracy. Every headline, every television panel, every breaking news banner is counting down to the moment when Starmer must face the country. And then there is the public mood, angrier, louder, and more relentless than ever before. This is no longer just a scandal, it has become a movement. It has become a test of whether the most powerful man in the country is still bound by the same laws as everyone else. Social media is ablaze, with calls for a national general strike if Starmer refuses to comply. Activists are promising rolling protests across the nation, with some groups already planning to shut down transport hubs and government buildings until the Prime Minister resigns. The clock is ticking. The government is barely functioning. Parliament is preparing for its most dramatic showdown in living memory, and the King is standing by in case the constitutional fabric of the nation must be preserved by royal intervention.